Hi everyone, welcome to Write by Mia. I'm Mia, and on this Writer's Library I will be talking about Giovanni's Room by James Baldwin. As many of you know who've watched my channel, you know that James Baldwin is one of my favorite authors. I've already done a video on his novel Another Country earlier, so definitely check it out if you haven't seen that yet. But this was actually a suggestion by one of my subscribers, Leland. Thank you so much for having me go through this book. It's really, really good and not a Baldwin book that I've read before, so I was really excited to read it, and now that I'm finished, I'm really excited to talk about it with you all. So let's go ahead and get started. First, a little bit of background on the book itself. It was written in 1956, and it was originally passed on by Baldwin's publisher due to its themes of homosexuality and the fact that the novel had a white male protagonist because, as you know, James Baldwin is Black, and they felt that that really wouldn't play well. He ended up finding a publisher for it, and now we have the honor of reading it as an audience. Brief summary of the book is that basically there's a young American expatriate named David who has just proposed to his girlfriend Hella. She has gone to Spain after this proposal to kind of think about it, and David has, now been by himself in Paris for a while and meets a bartender named Giovanni with whom he begins an affair, most of it taking place in Giovanni's room, hence the title. And Baldwin always delivers, I'll say that up front, but there are very specific things about this novel that I really, really liked and would love to share with you all. So first, regarding the writing style itself, Baldwin does a fantastic job in creating emotional immediacy in the reader by changing the actual style of how he writes the novel. So you feel really in the head of the protagonist and what he's feeling, and it creates like a very kind of strong connection to the protagonist, to the situation, and what he's going through. So I'm going to give you a couple of examples. So first, this is near the beginning of the novel when David first kind of meets and sees Giovanni in the bar. And so I'm going to read a little kind of snippet for you here. And this is David talking about Giovanni. And he took his round metal tray and moved out into the crowd. I watched him as he moved. And then I watched their faces watching him. And then I was afraid. I knew that they were watching, had been watching both of us. They knew that they had witnessed a beginning, and now they would not cease to watch until they saw the end. It had taken some time, but the tables had been turned. Now I was in the zoo, and they were watching. So what I really love about this is you get a sense of the protagonist's angst. He is not publicly gay at this time, and so he's really feeling very uncomfortable with how people are viewing him in this initial meeting with Giovanni. He sees people looking at them, and you notice that the language here, there's very short, simple sentences. I watched him as he moved, and then I watched their faces watching him. It creates sort of this staccato kind of cadence, in that you're really in the moment with him, in this sort of heart-stopping sort of anguish as he's trying to figure out what people are thinking, how he should react in the situation, and how he should react to perhaps these beginning feelings towards Giovanni. So I think the language, kind of abrupt, very short, really mirrors how David is feeling in the moment as he kind of begins this initial journey with Giovanni. So you have that kind of this short, simple prose compared to after, probably midway through the novel, after David and Giovanni have been together for, a little while, and you get a different type of language. I remember that life in the room seemed to be occurring beneath the sea. Time flowed past indifferently above us. Hours and days had no meaning. In the beginning, our life together held a joy and amazement which was newborn every day. Beneath the joy, of course, was anguish, and beneath the amazement was fear. But they did not work themselves to the beginning until our high beginning was aloes on our tongues. By then, anguish and fear had become the surface on which we slipped and slid, losing balance, dignity, and pride. different language, right? You can see the sentences are longer, the cadence is a bit slower, a bit more melodic. So you can kind of get a sense that David is now falling into this affair with Giovanni. His feelings are opening up a bit, and you can get a sense of that through the language. And Baldwin is a master at this as the novel progresses, as this affair with Giovanni progresses, and it really creates a connection, the reader with David as he is battling himself, battling Giovanni throughout this relationship. So point one, I love just the stylistic elements of this novel and how Baldwin uses that to create an emotional connection with the reader. Love. So number two, there's a really kind of beautiful theme going through the whole novel of mirroring. So David seeing or not seeing himself in Giovanni, trying to understand who he is through Giovanni. And that makes, I'm not going to give any spoilers, but the ending and the events of the novel more poignant and heartbreaking because David is seeing himself, seeing the hurt, seeing the pain through Giovanni. And so I'd love to kind of go through that a little bit. And it kind of starts right at the beginning where David is kind of looking back on this affair, starting from the beginning and looking back. And it starts off with, I stand at the window of this great house in the south of France as night falls, the night which is leading me to the most terrible morning of my life. I have a drink in my hand. There is a bottle at my elbow. I watch my reflection in the darkening gleam of the window pane. My reflection is tall, perhaps rather like an arrow. My blonde hair gleams. My face is like a face you have seen many times. So right from the jump, we get a very interesting sort of distance in the narration. You have this protagonist who's introducing himself, but he kind of does it at a distance, almost as if he's looking at himself and describing himself. He's seeing his reflection. He is kind of removed from the events, and so you really get kind of jarred at first, like this seems like a play, this doesn't even seem like he's talking about himself. He seems very removed, very objective, and almost kind of cold in the description. And from there to go into the, again, here comes the language, the depths of the affair with Giovanni, that theme is continued from the beginning of him literally looking at himself to it being a little more subtle later in the novel when he is back to looking at himself but is struggling to recognize himself. So this is near the end of the novel. The body in the mirror forces me to turn and face it, and I look at my body which is under sentence of death. It is lean, hard, and cold, the incarnation of a mystery, and I do not know what moves in this body, what this body is searching. It is trapped in my mirror as it is trapped in time, and it hurries toward revelation. Oh, don't you just love it? Don't you just love Baldwin? So from the beginning, you kind of see how it has transitioned. Again, not going to give any spoilers, transitioned into him literally taking himself out of the picture entirely and describing himself in the third person. So he's been on this journey of self-discovery and now is at the end of this journey and is completely detached. So for me, this theme, the way it flows through the novel, which if you read it, you'll really see it, is really interesting because on the one hand, you get the immediacy of the language, him and Giovanni, you get that immediacy, but then you also get him feeling very detached from himself as he struggles to discover who he is and what this affair with Giovanni means to him. Love it, love it, love it. In case you can't tell, I highly recommend this book. And lastly, I want to kind of take a step back from the novel itself and really discuss the larger context. I mentioned at the beginning that it was written in 1956. So from the jump, any mention, any hint of homosexuality in a novel at the time was incredibly bold. So Baldwin is really taking a risk here. He's being incredibly brave in tackling that subject matter. So not only that, but as a Black man writing a white male protagonist, that is something that was basically unheard of, because at that time it was like you kind of write what you know about, and the thought of a Black man writing as a white man within a homosexual context was, it really crossed a lot of barriers at the time. So I think given that larger context and infusing it into the novel itself, which is such a short but powerful exploration of these themes, I think really adds an extra layer of meaning and poignancy and heartbreak, I think, to what happens to these characters, and also what you can imagine happened to Baldwin as he was writing it and navigating probably the difficulties in not only writing it but just getting it out to people. So I think knowing that coming in, I kind of read the introduction and really wanted more background, made the novel that much more of a richer read, because you could really feel Baldwin's own anguish and focus in writing it because of what he was risking and what he was doing at a time when all of this was really unheard of and not common at all. So I think for that, I want to thank Baldwin and just tell you all that it's a beautiful novel to read. If you haven't read it already, I highly recommend it. And I want to shout out to my commenter Leland for asking me to read this and discuss it. I really, really enjoyed it. Last quick point, Leland did ask me in one of the comments to explain how in another country Baldwin says the price of love is the price of life and what that means to me. Again, I'm not like a literary expert, so you can take everything with a grain of salt, right? But to me, when I read that quote, I take it to mean that life is made or unmade by our decisions to love, and whatever that may look like. And not loving or not taking the risk to love can lead to just existing, because love is an incredibly fulfilling and rich part of life, and for me personally makes life worth living. But loving can also lead to the extremes of heartbreak and pain, as well as the greatest joys that life can offer. So it's kind of asking you, what price are you willing to pay for life? Are you willing to pay for a life of merely existing, of banality, where you're not going to experience any highs and lows, you're just going to remain on the same plane? Or are you willing to love, to risk, to potentially pay a high price in heartbreak and pain, but also potentially reap a beautiful reward in how fulfilling love can be in whatever form it takes for you? So Leland, thank you for that question, and hopefully that answers it. If not, feel free to shoot me a reply or another question in the comments. That is all I have to say. Definitely read Giovanni's Room if you haven't already. I really enjoyed it, as I enjoy most of Baldwin's work. Again, if you haven't, please like and subscribe. I drop videos like this weekly, and as you can tell, I'm incredibly passionate. And please, if you have any ideas for books I should read, or more content or suggestions for content I should put out, I would love to hear from you. But other than that, hope you all are staying safe. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.